Good morning, Grace St. Luke's family. It is good to be with you on this Sunday morning. I'm going to share, as is my custom, a few poems with you today. These poems today are Epiphany inspired in a way. I'm taking the idea of Epiphany broadly and widely, and really thinking about Epiphany as those moments when we kind of figure out there's more going on here, when we become aware that a bigger story is unfolding, or that we become aware of the more to our own stories, or the more to a story that we may be familiar to us. The Epiphany stories that we hear throughout this season in church are full of moments of people realizing who Jesus really is and what he is about, people recognizing him. There's lots of stories. The word manifestation is used a lot, Jesus becoming manifest in the world, and really people kind of having their blinders removed, or becoming aware, and having a sense of there's more to this person, there's more to this story, and that means there's more to life, there's more to everything. So I've chosen a few poems to share with you today, that, at least to my quirky way of thinking, kind of speak to that sense of kind of waking up, the light coming on, those aha moments, however you might think of Epiphany in your own life. And yeah, just a sense of, I didn't quite get it, I didn't quite see it, but now I do. And that moment may be fleeting. We may just have a glimpse of it, or it may be lasting, and it may change us in really profound ways. The first poem that I'm going to share with you has a kind of dark title, but I really want you to stay with me. Please stay with me. The first poem is called Everything is Plundered. And it's by a Russian poet. Her name is Anna Akhmatova. Anna Akhmatova. She won lots of awards. She lived and wrote, and the bulk of her work was in the early 20th century. She lived through all of the key events of Russian history, many of which were marked by tragedy, especially for her. She lost loved ones and families in various uprisings and tragic situations. And she was a poet and a writer, and that is one of the ways that she kind of coped, I guess, is a way of saying it, although I think sometimes that's not just what writers do, and certainly not just why writers write. Anyway, she lived a somewhat tragic life, but she writes this poem with what I said was kind of an ominous title, but stay with me. Everything is plundered. Everything is plundered, betrayed, sold. Death's great black wing scrapes the air. Misery gnaws to the bone. Why then do we not despair? By day, from the surrounding woods, cherries blow summer into town. At night, the deep, transparent skies glitter with new galaxies, and the miraculous comes so close to the ruined, dirty houses, something not known to anyone at all, but wild in our breast for centuries. I think this question that she asks is such an amazing question. Why then do we not despair? And she sets us up with, in brief form, the way poets do, very quickly, helping us to see how bad it can all be, right? Betrayed, sold, death's great black wing, really getting us into that place very quickly of, yeah, this world can be a hard place. Many of us have been through more of that and experienced more tragedy in the last year than in all of our years combined. Things have been dark for us personally, for our communities. nationally. And she names that and very succinctly gets us to that place of, yeah, there is despair here. And yet we do not fully despair. At least she does not. And the question is why? What is it? And she then begins to describe the simple beauties that are also present. Even as misery gnaws to the bone, she speaks of the cherries that blow summer into town, and the night's deep transparent skies and the glittering galaxies. And then these last lines are really the ones that spoke to me and moved me in this time and in this season. And the miraculous comes so close to the ruined, dirty houses. And in so many ways, that those two lines capture what, I don't know, when I have envy for those who were there when Jesus walked through the towns. I don't know that that's what she was talking about at all, but the miraculous came so close to their ruined, dirty houses. And my envy for those who were there, who heard the Sermon on the Mount, who were fed, who were called from their boats, even as I'm not sure how I would have responded or what I would have thought. Just that idea of how close the miraculous came and comes in these stories that are so familiar to us in our Christian journey, to the ordinary, quiet, small, forgotten corners, these kind of podunk little towns where Jesus ministered. It connected that ancient history for me in this modern poem. And then she finishes this way: something not known to anyone at all, but wild in our breast for centuries. And that, again, as I was saying, when we become aware of the more, of the presence of God, the movement of the Spirit, that it is mysterious, it is unknown, it is indescribable, and yet that wildness is also familiar and has always been there and is inside of me and inside of you. And her naming of that, for me, sounds a lot like the journey of faith and this sense of what is it that keeps me from despairing? Well, some days I despair. Some days the pit is deep and dark. But I also know of the glittering galaxies, and I also know that there have been moments where the miraculous has brushed up close to me and to those whom I love and those whom I know. And I do hold on to that wild and mysterious presence of God that that manifests sometimes, that bursts onto the scene or quietly creeps onto the scene, however God becomes known to you and to me in so many different ways. There's a story about the poet that another writer, George Saunders, tells. She was, as I said, her life was marked by tragedy. Her husband was killed and her son imprisoned. And she would go every day to get news of him with all of these other women whose beloved, mostly men, sons and brothers and husbands were in prison, and they never got news. But they would go every day. Would there be news today? And another woman in the crowd saw her and recognized her as a poet and said, "Poet, can you write this?" And the story goes that she said, I can write this." And I think that it is both a testimony to her naming of the despair of those moments and the ability to describe death's dark wing, and also, almost in the same breath, to speak of the miraculous and the beauty that is such an encouragement. And as we come into a new year, And as we bring a lot of the old year into this new year, so it doesn't quite feel as fresh and clean as maybe we wanted that new calendar page to feel, there is a sense for me of hopefulness that these stories are familiar, and that others have been through their own trials and continued to see stars and to look for the cherry blossoms that will bloom soon, the signs of spring and the signs of hope, whether they be metaphor or real in our own lives, and that we become more and more aware of them. The second poem that I want to share with you today is called Oceans, and it is by a Spanish poet. His name is Juan Ramon Jimenez. This poem, entitled Oceans, goes like this. I have a feeling that my boat has struck down there in the depths against a great thing, and nothing happens. Nothing. Silence, waves. Nothing happens, or has everything happened? And are we standing now quietly in the new life? This poem is new to me in this season, and but I've really been thinking about it a lot since it floated, no pun intended, into my life. This poem, Oceans, about the feeling that your boat has struck down there and in the depths against a great thing. Because if you notice, the poet doesn't decide if it's a good thing or a bad thing, if it's a frightening thing that he has hit something, or if it's a great thing that he has hit something. Has he hit land, and that's wonderful? Has he hit an iceberg, and that's terrible? A couple of weeks ago, I was listening to a podcast. The podcast is called This Is Love, which I highly commend if you're looking for some goodness and some wonderful stories. They're short and great. The podcast is called This Is Love. Anyway, the story that I was listening to was about a woman who, as a young person, was a long-distance free water swimmer, and she had this experience of swimming and became aware that she was swimming very close to a baby whale who was separated from its mother. Even a baby whale is a lot bigger than she was. And the story itself is almost magical. So go find that and listen to that. But the sense of like being close to something underwater that you can't quite identify or name, something mysterious, and trying to decide, do I need to be afraid in this moment, or do I need to be in awe in this moment? And I love how this poem lets you go any direction you want. And it seems particularly meet and right in our old language on this Sunday when we are in the Gospels hearing the stories of the fishermen who are encountering and called by Jesus. They don't actually run their boats into him, but they do come up against some new thing. And obviously, famously, they decide to follow him. They decide to drop their nets and leave their work and go and become fishers of men. But that sense of, I have struck against a great thing. And then the question, is this nothing, or has everything happened? And as the poet says in the last line of this poem, are we standing now quietly in the new life? What an amazing question. Much like our previous poem, which asked the question, how do we not despair? And to spend a minute thinking, what keeps me from despairing is worth jotting down, and to then think, am I in the new life? And what is different now? Because it's a new year or a new season or just a new day, or because I was sick and now I'm well, or because there's a new political administration, or because something else has changed, or I've set these New Year's resolutions, or I've started a new book or a new journal, or what is it about this moment that is potentially new for each of us? And is that discernible? Is that notice? Would anybody else looking around us even know, oh, things are different now for her? Things are different now for him. And do we know when our boats have struck down there in the depths against a great thing, and then for a minute, we're not even sure, did that happen? What changed? Are we in danger, or are we found, or are we saved? It's just such a wonderful way of thinking. At any moment, this encounter, this meeting, this day might be when we are struck. And as we, again, continue to move through this season of Epiphany, where we become aware, where we wake up, where we're maybe shaken awake or bumped awake by, striking against something or someone, where we hear something new, or something familiar that just is new for the first time, and we respond to it in a new way and are then quietly somehow changed. Our eyes are opened and we can't go back to the way we were before. We know things now that we didn't know a year ago about how intertwined our lives are, about how the world works for us and how the world works for others, and how stories that we thought were predictable are not. And that kind of epiphany season of, now I see differently, and I have different understanding, and I recognize maybe Christ in acting in the world, maybe the presence of God in this relationship, in this story, in this moment, that I could be changed and transformed. At the end of the Epiphany season, always we end the Epiphany season with the stories of the Transfiguration, and Jesus being transfigured in the presence of some of his disciples. And much is made of Jesus being visibly changed in front of them. But of course, what is really happening is that the disciples are changed, and we as followers are meant to be changed, because we have seen things and heard things and come to understand that what looked like an ordinary day was far from it. And what seemed like, just another story or just another encounter or just another anything was in fact the moment that we put down our nets and got up and followed Christ into some new adventure or some new way of being. And I don't know a whole lot about this poet. And again, I am bringing my interpretation to these poems when I do this, right? But this, the openness of this poem and the invitation of, what have you struck against? What has your boat run up against? And what have you felt, that kind of jarring sensation of, oh, and then wondering, is this a magical encounter? Is this good? Is this frightening to me? How will this change me? And then we ask, did nothing happen and we just went on about our lives? Or has everything happened? And are we standing now, quietly, in the new life? The third poem for this morning is called Sometimes. I am pretty sure that I have shared this poem with y'all before. It is a poem that I return to because it is a hopeful poem. And especially I feel like since I started with Everything is Plundered, I needed maybe to end with something with a little uplift. Although I hope I haven't been too much of a downer for you. This poem is called Sometimes, and it is by an Irish poet. Her name is Sheena Pugh. And it goes like this. Sometimes things don't go, after all, from bad to worse. Some years, muscadel faces down frost. Green thrives, the crops don't fail. Sometimes a man aims high and all goes well. A people sometimes will step back from war, elect an honest man, decide they care enough that they can't leave some stranger poor. Some men become what they were born for. Sometimes our best efforts do not go amiss. Sometimes we do as we meant to. The sun will sometimes melt a field of sorrow that seemed hard frozen. May it happen for you. Epiphany is also January. And I love the month of January, actually. I love the fresh starts. I love the new calendar pages and all of that. I love January because my birthday's in January, and the new sharpened pencil feeling of a new year and all of that. And it seems this year in particular that there's just so much anticipation for the coming of the new year. And then we got here, and it's not been, all ponies and rainbows and sunshine, shall we say. And so in this January, where a lot of 2020 has come with us into 2021, and in this season where things are still cold and it is still winter, and we are still in the midst of COVID and all of that means. And it does seem like spring is a ways off, and all of those hoped for times to come where we can demask and be with people and celebrate and sing together and just be together still seems a little way off. This poem offers us a glimpse of that light, and if there is something that Epiphany is about, it is also about light and an awareness, a coming and understanding of what is all, like I said at the beginning, really going on here. And I happen to believe that what's really going on here is toward the good. Somehow, some way, we are inching our way through fits and starts toward the good. So that when she says things don't go from bad to worse sometimes, I believe her, and I am hopeful. And the last lines of this poem serve, I think, as an excellent benediction for all of us in this beginning of a new year, in the midst of this season, maybe even as some of us are already thinking about Lent and what that might mean, and forward on beyond that. Some people are long-range planners, some people are just get me through the day. But either way, these last lines, I think, might serve us all well. Whether you're trying to get through today or whether you're thinking about the whole blessed year and what is to come, I offer you this. Sometimes our best efforts do not go amiss. Sometimes we do as we meant to. The sun will sometimes melt a field of sorrow that seemed hard frozen. May it happen for you. Sometimes our best efforts, friends, do not go amiss. Sometimes we do as we meant to. The sun will sometimes melt a field of sorrow that seemed hard frozen. May it happen for you. I miss you. I miss being with you. I cannot wait for our reunions and joy-filled gatherings. And in this frozen time, I believe in the sun and in the coming defrosting and melting, and in the joy and in the hope that is on the horizon. May it happen for you and me and all of us. Peace be with you, friends. I'll see you soon.